Okay, so as per my last video, I was hunting down a minor leak after installing a replacement thermostat housing in my Ford Explorer. This thermostat housing I bought from Aliexpress. It was cheap as chips, but I've discovered a couple of problems with it. It was leaking, and I presumed it was because the sensors were loose, and I discovered that this seat here is actually not molded into the plastic properly, so it was actually leaking out from between the seam here. One of the sensors, I didn't check the sensors when I installed it, just because I figured they were, you know, tight, but after pulling it apart, I've discovered that this one was loose. And yeah, so you know, you don't want to be having problems with your water cooling on these Explorers. They don't like being running out of water and getting hot, because then all the plastic parts inside the motor shit themselves. Yes, well, anyway, moving right along. I also suspect that one of these sensors isn't working, because the temperature gauge just sits bang on, you know, what would be normal running temperature as soon as you start the motor. That's obviously wrong. It should be you know, starting off from the cold position and moving up to the warm position once the thermostat housing opens. The thermostat opens inside here and lets the warm water through. So that was another issue that I was trying to track down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to sort of patch this up. In reality, these are just standard problems with this particular design of thermostat housing. This part here tends to warp and go out of shape, causing this to leak at some point. So this time around, when I reinstall it, I'm going to be adding some gasket cement, or you know, silicon gasket cement in here, and all of these sealed surfaces areas, just because I just don't want to have to pull it apart anymore. Another fail point for these thermostat housings is in here. I've seen a lot of them with cracks through this part here. It just seems to be the common place for them to sort of let go. So I'll probably be filling that with an epoxy putty, just to give it a bit of extra strength. And I'll also be applying the epoxy putty to this area here to try and hold this and seal this from leaking at temperature. Not really sure how successful I'll be, but just to give you an indication on how loose it is. Do that up finger tight. Not sure if you can see, but you should be able to see a gap. You should be able to see that whole thing moving. So yeah, basically I've got this epoxy steel stuff I'm going to install around here and see if that's going to help me. Okay, well I've mixed this stuff. I like this steel epoxy. It's super hard like plastic, or super hard like steel, should I say. And I've applied it, but not very pretty. It's struggling to grip onto the brass, so I don't actually think it's going to work from this perspective. And I've installed a bit on the back side where the cracks usually are on these things. I don't know whether that's actually going to help at all or not. It's just an experiment, really. What I may do is get some super glue and try and, you know, just drop a bit of super glue around that hexagonal edge, and hopefully the super glue, being so thin, will just sort of seep down into it. I'll let it dry first, and then I'll try that as well, and hopefully that will seal that and hold that in place properly. And once I install the sensors, I should be able to put it back together. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so 24 hours later, it's rock solid. So I think that might have sealed it. I don't know. I guess it could just be sitting on the surface of the brass. There's a little bit I put underneath here to strengthen this place where I've noticed the cracks before. It's very hard stuff, this, so hopefully it'll hold it all together. I'm just going to go ahead and put the old sensors in, because I think there's something wrong with one of these. Not entirely sure, and I don't really want to be pulling it apart again. So yeah, the old sensors were working from the old housing that was broken. So back in they go, and then I'll be sealing the thermostat in and putting it all back together. I'll keep you up to date. Yeah, so just an update on the situation. I pulled the old thermostat housing that I had that was broken apart, and discovered that this piece here is not supposed to be solidly mounted into there. There's actually a little seal inside there, and I guess it just presses in and it's supposed to seal, but this seal on here obviously isn't good enough. Well, it wasn't sealing at all, which is kind of weird. Why would you want to have a seat just sort of randomly press in? I suppose maybe they struggle to mold it into the plastic when they make this shape, so that was their answer, but it wasn't sealing properly anyway. So interesting. So yeah, well, what I've done in theory should work. We'll just go ahead and wait and see what happens next. Yeah, but just a little update for you on what I've just discovered. Okay, so I got this thermostat housing back together, and I have added in some sealant. I've got the gasket. It was pretty flush actually, so I've got it sort of raised, sitting proud, with a cushion of this silicone seal underneath it, so that when I put it in, it will tighten down, and it should hopefully seal real good. Now, I noticed another thing with these is they tend to warp the thermostat housing at the top, and if you know, this is a brand new thermostat housing. I'd only done a few Ks on it when I discovered there was a problem with the sensor seat, and as you can see, putting it back together, you can see that the top part has actually warped already, or it was like that when I got it. I didn't really pay attention. So yeah, adding silicone seal into there is a really good idea, because these do fail, and it's a bummer trying to get back into repair something that is annoying like that. So it's taking the precaution to do that this time around. I'll put it back in, and hopefully I won't be having any more problems with this leaking coolant, but I'll soon see. Okay, so I have installed the thermostat housing, and I have run it for 450 Ks, a pretty long run, down country and back, and it isn't leaking a single drop, which is really, really good news. I suspect it should be fine for some time now. Don't think it's going to fail. There's definitely no water down there. It's holding together well, so those repairs will work for now. I'm not sure how long it'll hold out for though, so that's the only issue I have. Yeah. Okay, so I had bought a second one from the same seller on AliExpress before I discovered the problem with the first one. This one is for another vehicle, another Ford Explorer, and for the seller's purposes, there you go, there's your shipping docket number, and so we shall see. Okay, let's get it out. Okay, so this is the second housing I've got from the seller, and it's a little, yeah, everything seems like normal, but let's have a look here at the problem part. Yeah. So yeah, these, we can just get a clear shot of it. Yep, this one is also loose, so I suspect this would actually leak as well. If you look there, you can see the movement, quite plain as day. So with the first one, yeah, I did a lot of repair. I had to put epoxy around here, just to recap. Epoxy in here, this is where they normally fell. Well, they tend to fall in there as well. There's a crack, as I explained. The sensors weren't working, so I installed the old sensors on the first one, and the gauge works fine now. So yeah, the issue I have with these is they're not put together very well. There's way too much movement, and it leaks, which is not what you want. So it's something I'll have to address with the seller, and we'll see what sort of reply I get. So far they have not responded whatsoever to any emails from myself nor AliExpress, so no surprises there. Oh well, thank you for looking at this, and we'll see what happens next. Thank you.